Hello YouTube, I am Wheels on Wheels, and today I'm going to be working on this 2010 Volkswagen Fox in beautiful yellow, as you can see. So I'm going to be doing a mini service, so just an oil change and an air filter change on it, and I'm also going to be doing a driver's side anti-roll bar drop link because there's a bit of a clunk on the suspension at the moment. So I hope you'll join me for the experience. So let's get started on the service to begin with. So the car is now on axle stands. Make sure you're always using axle stands when you're doing anything underneath the car. I feel it's necessary to mention that. Make sure you're always using axle stands. Okay, so underneath the car, here's the oil sump, and it's just a 19mm bolt to undo, and then the oil should all drain out. Grab your oil drain pan and just loosen off the sump plug. There we are. Ooh, it's black. That is some black oil. This definitely needed a service. Make sure to have some cloths on standby if you're doing this at home, because it's almost impossible to not get oil on your hands when you're removing the sump plug. So something like this is excellent. Basically some wet wipes, but made for really dirty jobs. They're really good. Okay, while the oil is draining, you're going to want to remove and replace the oil filter, which is located right here. Now, to remove this, you need a 36mm socket. This is not a socket you'll get in your average socket set, so you do need to generally buy an oil filter socket set. And on this particular engine, this 1.2 3-cylinder, you can see the oil filter housing is right above the alternator. So you don't really want to pour loads of oil into your alternator. So the best thing to do, I find, is just put a cloth above it there. And if you can, put a little tub underneath it like that. And then start removing the oil filter. Yep. Now eventually you should be able to just remove it by hand, like this. Yeah. Okay, that filter should have stayed in the housing really. Never mind. Just pull it out, straight into the little tub, and there you have it. Okay, so that's the oil filter removed, and basically what you have to do is just remove the oil filter from the housing, like that, put it in the box, and pop the new filter in. Now, it will only go on one way. Usually the writing of the brand goes to the top of the oil filter housing. There we are. And that should just click into place. And there is also a seal to replace right here. So the way to do that is grab a pick tool, remove the old seal, just work it around like this. Remove that. Grab a fresh bit of oil from your new oil jug that you've bought to do your oil change. Work all around. Don't ask why I've got one glove on and not on the other. I just only have one glove. I've only just moved house. Don't hate on me, please. There we are. And that is ready to be reinstalled. Okay, now it's time to reinstall the oil filter. Back in there. Now with the new seal, it does feel a bit tighter usually than it was before. Just make sure you put a healthy amount of oil onto the actual seal so it doesn't bind up, because then you'll get leaks. So do it up by hand as much as you can. Then you want to grab a torque wrench and torque it to 25 Newton meters. Now you can just do it by feel if you want, but I'm going to just use a torque wrench just to do it properly. Okay, the spec for this is 25 Newton meters plus 5 as a tolerance, which means it's not accurate. There we go. That's 25 Newton meters already right there. So you don't need to do it too tight, but you do have a tolerance of 5 Newton meters. So if you do it to 30, that's okay, but anything over 30 is too tight. Right, let's move back underneath the car to do up the sump plug and get ready to fill it with oil again. Before you reinstall your sump plug, you're going to want to do one of two things. You're either going to want to replace the sump plug, which will come with a new washer, or put a new copper washer onto the existing sump plug, which is what I'm going to do, because it is more cost effective. So you'll see that's quite squashed, that washer, and they're called crush washers because they squish, because copper is quite a soft metal and it conforms to the steel that it is screwing into, or aluminium in some cases, and yeah, it seals perfectly against the sump, so you get no leaks. So that's a new washer on there. Now that is ready to be screwed back into the sump. And the torque spec for this, I believe, is 30 Newton meters. So I've just got my torque wrench here, set to 30 Newton meters. There we are, that's tight. Okay, now it's ready to fill with oil. So, time to fill the oil. Now, this particular engine takes 3 litres of the correct 5W30 oil. However, there's quite a few different variations of these engines. So what I recommend if you're doing this at home is to use the Castrol Oil Check website, because that is amazing. It tells you what kind of oil and how much oil, most importantly, you need for your car just by searching the registration number plate. So highly recommend the Castrol Oil Check website. For now, I'm just going to fill sort of 2.5-ish litres. Then once the car is lowered down later on, we'll check it again. Look at that. Look at that. I'm well proud of that. Not a drip spilled. Oh, the wind took it at the end there, spilled a little bit. 1, 2, so I'll do a little bit more. And then we'll be ready to check later on and do the final fill once the car is level. Yeah, so that's about 2.5 litres. And we'll lower the car down later on once we've done the other bits and bobs, and we'll check the level and refill. Okay, so the next job is to replace the engine air filter. So as far as I can see on this car, it's just a case of removing this hose clamp, and there's 2, worryingly rusty looking Phillips head screws, and it looks like it just sort of has clips that go underneath there just to hold it in place. So I'm going to get started on that. So to remove this hose clamp, I'm just going to be using one of these proper hose clamp pliers. If you're following along at home and you haven't got one of these, you can just use regular pliers. Just remove it like that. Pull it off the hose like that. Very rusty, but managed to remove them. Oh no, I lost that screw. Now this one is quite difficult to reach and also very rusty, starting to round, but I am managing just about to get it turning. So instead of using a screwdriver, I've instead switched to my electric ratchet with a Phillips head bit, because it was really difficult to get a screwdriver down there. If you use the right bit, it helps. That's a PZ2. It seems to fit. Didn't lose this one. Okay, so there we are. That's the top of the air filter box removed. And here is the air filter. Pretty dirty, but not too bad. If we just compare that to the new one. Here is the new one. So would have been a similar colour when it was new. So you can sort of see the difference there. So what I'm doing now, so that I can find the screw that I've lost, is removing the actual bottom of the airbox. So if you're following along with us, you probably won't need to do this, because this is just me making a silly mistake. But you know, makes good content. So there's a little screw that connects the actual airbox to this intake pipe. That just holds it in place. That should come out. There we are. And then this box should just pull up because it's just on rubber grommets. There we are. Still can't see the screw. Fantastic. Ah, dear me. That is so annoying. How little jobs become massive jobs. All because of a lost screw. Let me go under the car and check. No. It has literally dematerialized. Like it is just not here. Okay, so I wasn't able to find the screw at all, which is very annoying. However, I found a very similar screw which has a very similar thread, and because it's just screwing into the plastic on the box, as long as it's not too long, it should be fine, as long as it's tight. So that is something that can happen, guys. So this is a realistic video. So when you're reinstalling these air filter boxes, really good idea to spray some silicone spray on the rubber bushes. That just helps it to seat nicely onto the pins that it sits on. There we are. That's better. There we are. Push it down. Okay. So pop in the new air filter. I'm just going to pop this tube back in where it belongs. And pop the lid back on, just hooks under there, almost like a hinge. There we are. So, okay, air filter replaced. Or not, actually, because I haven't put the intake clamp on. Now the air filter's replaced. Okay, so now it's time to take a look at the Droplink. So here's a new one. It's a Wheelz one. So let's get started. Pull the wheel trims off. If you're doing this at home and you don't have a big hefty impact like this, you're going to want to slacken off these wheel bolts whilst the car's on the ground. Should have mentioned that earlier, but this isn't a perfect instructional video, it's just me working on the car video. Try doing that with your hand tools. Okay, just pop the wheel down. Good practice is to just put it underneath the car, just for a bit of protection. Not protection for the wheel, protection for if the car falls, so it has something to fall onto. Not that it will, because it's on axle stands anyway, so it should be fine. Okay, so here is our anti-roll bar drop link, and as you can see, the boot on the top one has completely split open, probably gone completely dry. So that is a dud. That will not pass an MOT, I don't think. And I think it's also the source of the clunking. So I'm going to get started on that now. If you're undoing this without any power tools, so without an impact gun, you're going to want to counter hold this here, which is a Torx, whilst turning this with a spanner. However, because I have an impact gun, I should be able to hopefully loosen it off with just that. This is a 16mm nut, so I'm just going to pop that on my impact and give it a go. So the impact gun did loosen off the top nut. However, as usual, the ball joint started spinning, which is pretty normal, of course. So what you have to do, and what I'm currently doing, is putting a spanner on it. It's a 16mm spanner and a T30 bit in the end to counter hold it, and just undoing it that way. So you can either turn the ball joint itself and the spanner will hold the nut, or you can do it the other way around. And you should see in a moment, there we are, that's it. That's the nut removed. The ball joint should just pop out. And as you can see there, that ball joint looks mullered. So don't know yet if that's caused the knocking, but it seems quite loose, so I suspect it probably is. And for the bottom, as you can see, I've got some grips on the other side because it's a bit difficult to sort of counter hold it. And because we're not using the ball joint again, it doesn't matter. And then just loosen off the nut whilst the ball joint is being counter held. There we are, that's that nut off. And that is one old Droplink. Okay, so here is the new and the old Droplink. It's a good idea just to check them, make sure they're correct, the same size and everything before you fit them, which these are. These are nice Febby Bilstein parts, which are a reasonably good brand. Had some issues in the past, but for ball joints like this, they seem to be quite good. So refitting is more or less the reverse of removal, except you don't want to put any grips on the back of this because you can damage the boot. So it's best to counter hold using the end of the thread, which in this case is some sort of hex nut. But depending on what Droplinks you buy, it varies. Sometimes they're Torx, sometimes they're hex, you know, Allen. You can use an Allen key or whatever for it. It just depends on what you buy. I'm just going to refit this now. Okay, so for the top one, I've managed to do it up just with the impact gun, so that is nice and tight, that's not going anywhere. For the bottom one, however, I can't get an impact on it, so I'm just putting a 5mm hex to counter hold it, and it will be a case of tightening it with the spanner and counter holding it with the ratchet. Okay, that's good and tight, that is. So that's the driver's side Droplink done. As I say, I managed to tighten that with the impact without it spinning. Usually the ball joints are quite tight when they're new, so they don't actually spin, so you can usually tighten them quite easily, especially with a power tool. The bottom, as you saw, I had to counter hold it, and it was a bit of a nightmare, but that's just how they are. This side I've come round just to have a check, thinking it would be okay, but actually, don't know if you can hear that, but that is clunking just with a small amount of pressure. All I have to do is pull and push it a little bit and that clunks. So the ball joint, I think at the top here, is completely shot. So I'm going to crack on and replace this one as well. Luckily I bought two. So yeah, usually with suspension components you replace them in pairs. Not always with Droplinks. Droplinks aren't always necessary to replace in pairs, but yeah, luckily I got two, so I'll get on with that now. So I've removed the Droplink from the passenger side now of the Fox, and it is in much worse state than the other side, surprisingly. So looks can be deceiving. I assumed this one was at fault originally when I just took a quick look at it, a quick inspection, because of the split boot on the ball joint. However, when I took this one apart, as you saw a moment ago, there was play in this top ball joint, and there really is a lot of play. But not only that, for some reason, it had two nuts on it. This one, which looks like it's been attacked with an angle grinder, that was the first nut on it, and it also had this nut on top, but for some reason, probably because of how bad the thread was on it. It's more of the memory of what a thread once was, that is seriously bad. That was very difficult to remove. I don't know what happened there. And then the other side, which seemed fine really, the ball joint more or less just fell out. It came apart. So this drop link was on the verge of falling to pieces basically. So I'm going to grab the new drop link and fit it up, and that should cure the knocking. I'm more than confident now that this was the reason for the knocking in the suspension. So what I'm doing here, I don't know if you can see, is I've got my electric ratchet on a long extension on a 5mm hex bit. It's been counter held with a 17mm spanner, and what I'm doing is running the electric ratchet in reverse, which tightens up the nut. Okay, that is one new drop link fitted. Now that both drop links have been fitted, it's time to put the wheels back on the car and lower the car back down on the ground. Just to explain for anybody who's interested, I use this Halfords Advanced trolley jack, excellent jack, and I use one of these jack pad tools that basically cup the pinch weld where you jack the car up so that it doesn't damage it. They're basically like a hockey puck but with a slot cut out. That's essentially all they are, and they sit on the flat bit of the jack. So it just protects the pinch weld from being crushed. Torque spec for the wheel bolts is 120 Newton meters.
A few minutes later.
Right, I've put the wheel trims back on. I have topped up the oil level so it's perfectly full now. The only thing left to do is give it a quick test drive just to make sure all is how it should be. So let's go. These are such fun little cars. There's something so fun about this sort of car, a little yellow economy car that is not even remotely designed for any sort of performance. It's just something about them that just makes them so inherently fun. It has its quirks. You know, this one, I've just noticed the indicators don't self-cancel at all. That's a video for another day, I suppose. But yeah, it's a great little car, and I am pleased to say that the knocking from the suspension appears to be gone. And of course it's running well thanks to the fresh oil service. So that's it for this car then, I believe. We'll give it a blast. I love how you can go flat out and still under the speed limit. It's so fun. thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this. There's going to be more content with my Focus ST coming out soon. So if you're interested in that, please do subscribe. And if you have any questions about the video you've seen today, I'm sure you may have many questions, but ones you might not want to ask me because it might not seem like I know what I'm doing, please leave a comment. But thanks so much guys for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.